So, local elections. We've had local elections again, lots to talk about. I'm going to go over a couple of the questions just to begin with. I don't normally do this, but there's been a couple of relevant ones. If I don't answer it, just bring it up later on. It just means I want to wait a bit later. I'll just stick the results up for your delectation while I go over a couple of ones from here. Matthew's there's about my biggest concern public might not attribute the improved standard of living is down to Labour policies, but their own personal circumstances. Labour need to improve the communications. They absolutely do. And I'm planning a video for tomorrow where I go through what we know are some of the popular policies that Labour have and are enacting, and how better communication would help people to see them. But at the moment, their communications is poor and they're not showing any signs of improving it. So we have to work on I can hope that they improve their communications, but I think we have to work on the assumptions that they will not. There was one here saying, do Labour have any popular frontbenchers who could have swung the by-elections if they'd turn up? Look, they were 6 votes short. So I could have bloody turned up and got that many out. Yes, they do. Angela Rayner, she was there, but she wasn't there in the days leading up to the election. What you needed was some big guns there on the day before the election and the day of the election. If they'd have done that, they'd have absolutely got them out. In terms of who it would be, I mean, ideally, you'd need to find out who is popular specifically in like the Runcorn area. But I'm going to suggest, let's think about the type of voter that would have been easiest to get out, right? So there were probably quite a few sort of Labour supporters who weren't really feeling it. They're a bit cheesed off at the PIP policy, maybe the winter fuel policy, stuff like that. So it's a case of, right, who do you send to talk about the stuff that they're not thinking about? So Angela Rayner, not just because she could be popular in that area, but also because she's dealing with the planning reform. So you can talk about housing, affordable housing, social housing, help for first-time buyers. Ed Miliband on energy, right? So he's quite popular amongst a lot of progressive voters who might have been minded to give it a miss because they don't think Labour are worth supporting at the moment. He could have been talking about his stuff, you know. So, and there are other ones who are quite charismatic as well, like David Lammy and so on. But I would have been thinking in terms of, if you're targeting people who are just not mindful of the big stuff that Labour are putting through, that is going through, then I would say Angela Rayner for the housing stuff. Also, she could talk about the renters' rights bill, which will also be popular among certain voters, and Ed Miliband on energy stuff. Ed there saying Labour have definitely changed their social media content strategy since Lyons came in. I will judge it when it is effective. I'm going to keep going over this same point, right? It's really this simple. Where is it? Not for the first time. I'm just going to mention something. I'm going into my own channel to April's analytics. In the month of April, I had, in terms of unique viewers, 887,000 unique viewers. That's across that month. Some aren't in the UK, 53% in the UK, so it's like 450,000, right? And each of those 450,000 could then go and talk to some other people about the issues raised. Labour, until Labour realise that I could help them get their own YouTube channel with really simple stuff. I was talking about this on Graham's stream on Friday. I could give them some ideas with very low effort, because they've got way more potential than I have. They do not have to work as hard as I do for these sort of views. Or if they worked as hard as I do, they could get way more, right? I could give them some really easy ideas and their YouTube channel would take off. Absolutely guaranteed. I'm absolutely confident about that. And they could have that direct line to the public, but they don't. They don't at all. Anyway, right, let's just get back onto track in terms of what happened. First of all, I just want to point out how unprecedented these election results were. Now, here's what I'm now thinking. So if you were first of all, I don't think British politics is going to be the same again. Not just after this week. I just want to, if you were to imagine, every now and then, politics in a country fundamentally changes the way it was. Sometimes politics was not just in a weird place, but fundamentally changing forever. You would expect to see unprecedented elections taking place. I would now say we've had 3 unprecedented elections taking place. The first was in 2019. So in 2019, it was a very, unlike last year, which is very fragmented, it was a very polarised election. A lot of people swung to Labour and the Conservatives because there was seen to be this super important issue, Brexit, and it was absolutely vital that we had the right government in charge of it. And for some people, that was the Conservatives, some people it was Labour. So you had this polarisation. And yet, in a polarisation election, you would expect each of those parties to be able to hold on to its strongholds. But Labour lost a lot of seats, strong seats, to the Conservatives. That was unprecedented, certainly in modern times. Then there's the 2024 general election, which was also unprecedented in that it was the most fragmented elections ever. Even though it was part of a trend, it's not a one-off, it's not an outlier, it actually follows a pretty strong correlation going back to the 1970s. But then these elections were unprecedented as well. So these are a couple of charts presented by Dylan Difford, who's a really good analyst. He presented them on his Blue Sky account. And this just shows you how unprecedented this week's elections were in multiple ways. So the top chart shows you the level of seat change, right? Seats changed. You can see it's not just that Reform UK won loads and loads of seats. They absolutely did, 41.5%. It's that the overall change of seats was massive. Now, this data goes right back to 1975. So bear in mind, there were no local elections in 2020 for obvious reasons. So that is exactly 50 data points. In those 50 years, this is by far and away the greatest number of seats changing hands up as a proportion. The previous record holder was 1981. 1981, of course, Margaret Thatcher, deeply unpopular. I think that was when we had the first Thatcher recession, wasn't it? Which everyone seems to forget that she had 2 bloody recessions, but she got away with them. She kept winning. But yeah, the Conservatives were deeply unpopular at the time. This is pre-Falklands War, but I think it was around when the recession was happening. And Labour and the Liberals, as they were at the time, gained. Whereas 2025 has not just beaten that, it has absolutely smashed it. Smashed it. Then the lowest chart. Now, the lowest chart's quite interesting. This shows you specifically for the government in Westminster, how they did in local elections of that year. So wherever there's a red bar, Labour were in government. Wherever there's a blue bar, the Conservatives were in government. Now, what you can see is, again, 50 data points. And you can see that in almost every year, in fact, it's exactly 40 of those 50 years, the current government take net losses in local elections. It's only been 10 years where the incumbent government has actually made net gains in local elections. So it's very rare that that happens. It's certainly very uncommon. So the fact that Labour took net losses in these local elections is not anything to panic about. The problem is the sheer scale of it. You can see here, it's actually quite hard to tell, but it's actually in that 50 years, this year, Labour lost as a percentage more council seats than at any point in the last half a century. It's worse, slightly worse than 2009, which was after the banking crisis and when they were basically on their way out. So, it's, yeah, the fact that that's a negative bar for Labour, not that big a deal. The fact that it's a big negative bar for Labour, that's a problem. Even then, I would still say it's not worth... Labour shouldn't panic, because there were a couple of other things to give them succor. first of all, that Westminster by-election loss, they would not have lost it if they didn't put any effort in. Do you know what I read? It may be wrong, by the way, I don't know. But in The Guardian, I read an article that suggested earlier in the week that Labour had given up. They were because I was wondering, why are they not sending the big guns there? And apparently it was because they'd given it up. They thought they were going to lose it. And it's like, well, they did lose it by 6 pissing votes. So if that's true, and it may not be true, but if it is true, then Labour have royally messed up. Because I kid you not, even Starmer could have turned out those 6 voters, right? Just turning up. Starmer should have got... Don't imagine because Starmer isn't particularly popular right now that he should have stayed away. No, he shouldn't. He should have gone there. Because then at least people... Like, what impression does it give when the leader doesn't go? It's like, well, they don't care about us. 6 votes. 6 votes. Just that. Just giving that impression that the leader doesn't care about the election could have cost those 6 votes. So I am absolutely going to say Labour should have won. They would have won Runcorn if they'd have taken it seriously. I've no doubt that the activists did really well, but from the leadership. The other reason why Labour shouldn't absolutely panic is because this particular local election was mostly the sort of seats where either Labour have no chance anyway because they're like Conservative areas, or they're those sort of areas where Reform UK are likely to do well. Remember, Reform UK cannot win everywhere. There are certain areas that Labour have that Reform UK will not do that well. And I will point out, even though Reform UK took over, you know, Doncaster Council, which is the council where I grew up, or the area I grew up, the town I grew up in. It's a city now. Labour did win the mayoral race for Doncaster. So it's not horrendous. Labour can get this back. And there are easy ways for Labour to get it back. Chris, they say Labour seem to be like a rabbit caught in car headlights. They need to get their act together sharpish. They do. They don't need to panic, though. They don't need to panic. There are things they have. The Conservatives are in a much worse situation because of this. But it's... sorry, Kara's just saying that. I wonder if the 2 main parties just think they can coast through these by-elections without any effort. That's not the case. It's absolutely not the case. I mean, there was effort, but just from the top team, that visibility. Because the other thing as well, I'll tell you another thing. When Keir Starmer goes to Runcorn, even if people lob tomatoes at him, right, it's going to get into the news. I don't think they would have lobbed tomatoes at him, by the way. We can't get the tomatoes since Brexit. So, but you know, like if a big beast in the Labour Party, if a senior cabinet member, particularly Starmer, goes to Runcorn, it's reported in the national news. So it raises the profile of the election as well. So they should have gone, and they should have gone the day before the election and the day of the election. But anyway, I could keep going on that forever. So that's the situation now. I mean, the pie chart shows you the spread of votes. Reform UK have absolutely beasted it. The Liberal Democrats gained significantly. In fact, they more than doubled their haul compared with what they had before in terms of those seats. The Greens also gained. But generally speaking, Reform UK are basically taking votes everywhere. Now, in terms of what needs to be done about this, so there's some polling I've already referred to in the odd video, and I'm going to keep referring to it because it's a document. I said at the time, so after the election, More in Common, who are a progressive analytics group, they do some polling and they do a lot of analysis. And they did a deep dive on voter attitudes straight after the election, the general election, right? And I said at the time that it should have been required reading of every MP of every party. It had a lot of useful information in it. Now, in terms of what Labour should focus on, so the top chart, I'll have to read it out to you because it may be a bit small for a lot of you. is what the public, what their test is, because it doesn't matter what Labour's main policies are. What are the public going to judge them on? So, top of the tree, 63% of people say, I will judge the Labour government favourably if they reduce NHS wait, or depending on how much they, because everyone expected Labour to reduce NHS waiting lists, but will they reduce them by enough? I'm confident on that one, because at the end of the day, they've already reduced them over winter. Now, if they can reduce them over winter before the budget even came into effect, they are definitely going to make major improvements to the NHS waiting list over this Parliament. So I am hugely confident of that top one. The next one is how much they lower the cost of living. That's obviously trickier, isn't it? Like, you know, we talk about there's a way in which Labour don't have direct control over it, and there's a way in which they do. So the way in which they don't is, although governments talk all the time about running the economy, they don't run the economy. That's a fallacy. The economy is a mixture of trade and internal spending and external investment, right? So you don't directly control all those things. You can have, you can influence it. Basically what the government do is try to provide as comfortable a bed for investment and spending and trade as possible, which is why Donald Trump is absolutely crushing the American economy, because he's made it incredibly uncomfortable to trade with America and to spend in America and to invest in America. Now, where have we gone with this? Labour have done pretty well in terms of making it more attractive for investment. We will still have to see the full effects of that. Then you've got, what is it now? You've got internal spending where Labour, I think, messed up. Absolutely messed up. Right, shall we just... Sorry, there seems to be someone just spamming the shit. I don't know how you're even spamming, but should we just go bye-bye there? Sorry about that. I just noticed it. I'm not actually sure how it's possible to spam like that. I'm going to have to check my settings again. But there we go. Should be gone now. So, the... where was I? Yes, so remember after the election, Labour actually did pretty well in the polls. They were business-like, they were organised, it was all brilliant, lots of things happening, lots of activity, lots of reporting, all very positive. Labour actually improved in the polls. And then we've got the riots that derailed them. Then after the riots, instead of going, because they then focused on the King's Speech and the budget. King's Speech and budget. King's Speech is where they do all their popular stuff. The budget's where they pay for all their popular stuff. So they should be hyping it up, going, oh, it's brilliant, right, we've dealt with that, we've dealt with the riots, we've done this. Now it's time to focus on getting our first bits of legislation out. We're going to be like improving workers' rights, and we're going to be improving renters' rights, and we're going to be, you know, cutting through the red tape on planning reforms. We're going to get Britain working again. And, you know, then the budget's going to come and we're going to provide the funding for all this, and it's going to be fantastic. It's going to set up GB Energy. We're going to be nationalising train companies. They should have, every single day, they should have been hyping the hell out of it. Overhyping it. I understand their attitude before the election of this idea of under-promise and over-deliver, but that's because in opposition, if you can get away with that, do it. And in opposition, you want people to feel that the government's going in the wrong direction. Once you're in government, you want them to think you've done a complete U-turn immediately. Like Donald Trump. Take Donald Trump. What did he do? He was inaugurated. Did he then go and play golf? No, he waited till the next day. The first thing he did when he was inaugurated, he got himself filmed signing 50 executive orders. Most of them were crap. They were illegal. Some of them weren't even like written out properly. They weren't drafted properly. They're all rubbish. But it gave the impression he was immediately doing something. Labour should have done the same. But instead what they did is they kept saying, oh, the economy is a bit crap. Oh, it's even worse than we thought. We don't think we can really fix this. And it's like, are you mental? So, and then what happened over winter, we had a noticeable decline in consumer confidence. Unexpectedly low amounts of spending. Now, I'm not going to lay I'm not going to say all of that was because of Labour's negative messaging, because I can't prove that, but I am thinking it. So anyway, cost of living, how much they reduce the cost of living, partly that is down to encouraging as much investment and spending and trade as possible. I think they're doing all right on the trade and investment. It's encouraging people to be optimistic enough to spend, which is where they're lacking. But the other thing they can definitely do is redistribute wealth. Even if your economy is shrinking, you can still make people feel better off by redistributing wealth. So again, they have some policies on that. 36%, so it's a significant drop at this point. People are not as bothered about. So the big two are the cost of living and NHS waiting lists. So I'm very confident on the top one. I'm 50-50 on the other one. How much they lower immigration, I mean, whatever I think about their immigration policies, they are set on doing it. So again, I'm confident that they will do that. The small boats will be an issue because they're not going to get rid of those. 24% whether they've cut taxes. They're obviously not going to do that. Forget it. Whether we have a closer relationship with the EU, we will. And actually, we'll have an even closer relationship with the EU than I thought was possible to begin with. How many homes they managed to build, that is another key aim of theirs. So if you look down this list, a lot of the things that people are deciding to judge Labour on, Labour are actually working on, and they are doing. So whereas with the Conservatives, remember, under Rishi Sunak, there was a huge disconnect between what people wanted him to do and what he was doing. Whereas with Labour, it's in alignment. Then if you're gonna say trying to get back, now do remember Labour have not lost that many voters to Reform UK, so they don't have to chase Reform UK voters. And I know you're going to say to me, well, why are they adopting all these policies then? Well, I don't know. But if they are going to try and chase back, they lost most of their votes to Lib Dems and Greens, right? But if they are going to try and chase down some of these Reform UK votes, then, which I am going to say are important in some of the so-called red wall seats. So, you know, okay, they do have to chase them a bit. Top issue for them, unsurprisingly, is levels of immigration, 64%. Well, Labour are going to bring down immigration. Net migration is going to fall across this Parliament. Labour are absolutely determined to the point of actually pursuing some policies that I think are bad, but there it is. Cost of living is also important to them. So again, it's going to be, Labour are going to be hugely motivated to do that. Asylum seekers crossing the channel, forget it. Anyone that's going to judge Labour on that, they've already said that they're not going to get rid of that problem. Supporting the NHS, Labour are going to win on that one easy, hands down, no problem. And Nigel Farage is going to lose on it. Because Nigel Farage, remember, despite him denying it, he's recorded even this year saying to privatise the NHS. That will become an even bigger problem for him because his argument is the NHS isn't working with the current model. The current model of funding isn't working. When Labour get it working again, now they won't get it awesome in 5 years, but they will get it much better. Labour will be able to say the model does work, you just need to do it properly. And then Nigel Farage will be left high and dry. So, you know, you can see here, there are definitely areas where Labour can get Reform UK votes back. And every Reform UK vote they get, remember, is worth 2 in constituencies that will be between Labour and Reform UK. So, come with some questions in a moment, but I'll just making the point that in actual fact, in terms of the things, the reason why Labour are unpopular at the moment is one massive reason is the stuff that Labour are doing that's really popular, the public are not aware that they're doing it. Now, in some cases, it's going to be a comms issue because they will never be aware of it unless you point it out to them. But there are some issues they will notice once it happens. So workers' rights, people will notice. Better pay, people will notice. Better relations with the EU, people who care about that will notice. Better standard of living, better housing, stuff like that. If it happens, they will notice. But anyway, they're not honest about the boat's problem. They're really outraged because people are still arriving after lorries shut off. The means of transport is the focus of racist opposition. I don't think Labour are treating this issue seriously enough at all. I don't think they're treating it. And the thing is about the boats problem is no one likes it. People who want asylum seekers to be treated with dignity don't like it because we don't want them making dangerous crossings across the channel. There's no need for it. You can have a processing centre in northern France. And people who are against asylum altogether, the people who go, we shouldn't have any refugees, tell them to piss off. They don't like it either. So like what? It's like Labour are pissing everyone off. So they are definitely going to lose votes over that. But they've committed to that policy. I wouldn't even bother trying to change their mind because they've obviously... I'm not going to come up with an argument they haven't already thought of. They're just... I don't know why they're doing it. I really don't. I'd almost be curious, but they've obviously fixed their mind on it. So they are going to lose votes on that. But they are going to gain votes on things like the NHS. They should gain them on the cost of living. Everyone wants the cost of living to come down. Labour know that that is top priority. Absolute top priority. I wonder if reform councils will get rid of lollipop men or women, dinner ladies and teaching assistants. So Nigel Farage has already started talking about a bit of Doge action, cutting out like diversity targets, which basically means preventing anyone who comes from an unorthodox background from being able to get decent jobs with the council, as well as attacking any jobs related to climate issues. So basically, I mean, a lot of people who work in council refuse do that, recycling and so on. So yeah, good luck with the strikes that may generate. Good luck with that, because remember, I'm going to point out a couple of things here when it comes to how Reform UK will run their councils. Right, I'm going to point out a few things. First of all, I'm going to point out, I think it's bold of Nigel Farage to openly be mimicking a Donald Trump policy, because look at what's happened in Canada. We've got Canada and Australia have had elections this year. In Canada and Australia, the Conservative opposition were nailed on to win in both countries at the start of this year. That was it. At the start of this year, if you were going to say to yourself, who's going to win the Canadian elections? Conservatives. Who's going to win the Australian elections? Conservatives. The polling was like, they were well ahead. Then Trump happened. It's all gone to hell. All gone to hell. In Canada, the Conservatives lost, and the Liberal Party, which is their centre-left party, actually gained more seats than they had at the previous elections. So it's not just that they stayed in power. They've stayed in power with... They didn't have a majority to begin with, and still don't. But they stayed in power with more seats. And the Conservative leader lost his own personal seat. In Australia, the Labour Party has won from being nowhere, and they have increased their number of seats, and the Conservative leader has lost their personal seat. There's a bit of a pattern emerging here. Donald Trump is not a popular guy. He's not making his policy. If you sound like you have policies similar to Donald Trump, you're not going to be popular. People need to remember that. Nigel, and people may say, oh, but it's not working in Britain, it's not working in Britain, people aren't turning off. Local elections. People know that in local elections you can't do that mad Trump shit. You can't. But you can, if they give Nigel Farage the keys to number 10, he could do it then. I am telling you, there's a very good chance, things could be different in a few years. I think there's a very good chance that in 4 years' time, 3 or 4 years' time, it could be 2028 when we have the election, that any party that is aping Donald Trump's policies, or that people, even if they go quiet on it, if people think that they want to replicate what Donald Trump has done, and think about how much damage, how obvious the damage will be in 2028. Think about how much damage Donald Trump will have done in 2028, and think, if we have our election then, do you really, honestly, looking at what happened in Canada, looking at what happened in Australia? Because in Canada you could say, but you know, Donald Trump was actually threatening them with literal invasion. Australia, he wasn't. In Australia, they've turned off the Conservatives. Donald Trump wasn't threatening Australia. He didn't even land them with massive tariffs. It's like the 10% that we have, right? It's literally just that the Conservative Party were mimicking Donald Trump-like lines. They just didn't want a government that's like Donald Trump. So I'm going to suggest that when Donald Trump has done even more damage at the next election in this country, I think it's going to be a major albatross around the neck of any party that tries to use the same sort of rhetoric as Donald Trump and MAGA and Elon Musk have been using. Nigel Farage is riding high at the moment. There are so many headwinds coming his way. And also think about this. Have you noticed how we don't really have proper scandals in government anymore? Have you noticed that? Like, the closest thing we had to a scandal is someone bought, a Labour politician bought Keir Starmer some glasses. Do you believe that? A mate of his, a friend who's also a Labour politician in the Houses of Parliament, bought him some glasses. The fiend. That's what passes for a scandal. Or that Louise Hay got done for, you know, like losing a phone but then not announcing she'd found it again. Those are scandals. I mean, think about the scandals we've had with the Tories. You know, tractor porn and, you know, gold wallpaper and all the rest of it. Reform UK are going to have some scandals. They're going to have some scandals. I mean, councillors are a lower level, right? But there's so many nutty councillors that Reform UK have. They're going to generate scandals. I'm going to point something else out as well. So not only might Reform UK risk council strike action with some of their potential policies, but I mean, anyone who's had any involvement with councils knows that some councillors are really good. You know, they really put an effort in. They don't really get paid, and yeah, they're brilliant. Some of them are on the take. You know, they're there to give public contracts to businesses that either they own or their mates own. Construction. It's not uncommon for councillors to either own a construction company or know someone who does, right? There's a lot of dodginess goes on. Reform UK will be in on that, yeah? Now, Labour, as well as strengthening workers and union powers, which will be interesting if Reform UK invite any strikes, say, next year, they also are introducing an office for value for public money. Now, when that happens, I don't think it's just intended for Westminster spending. I think it's intended for all public spending, which means they can also scrutinise spending by councils. So Reform UK could well introduce quite a few little scandals into the mix as well. What was this one? All right, this is a useful one to have a look at as well. Let me just find it so I can see it as well. So, in terms of, again, the issues that Labour need to focus on. So, first of all, do you remember the six first steps that Labour had? So, blue means that they were popular. Dark blue means, like, very good. Light blue means good. So, all of Labour's 6 first steps, which I'll read out, 40,000 more NHS appointments each week. So, they're already doing that. Crack down on antisocial behaviour, set up Great British Energy, recruit 6,500 new teachers, stick to tough spending rules, and launch a new border security command. All of those were incredibly popular. So again, it shows that despite their they're clearly making strategic errors, we know that, but it does show that they are in tune with what people want, as much as you might think otherwise. And then the one below it is specifically about immigration, because obviously this is going to be a key wedge issue with Reform UK for Labour in a lot of areas that aren't even coastal, so it's mad. The red is that government should reduce the numbers. So, and the dark blue is that numbers should actually go up. We don't have enough immigration. And light blue is should be about the same. And grey is don't know, right? So you can see here, even Green voters, Green Party voters, there's 34% of them think the government should reduce the numbers, 10% think they should go up, 34% think they should stay about the same. So even in the Green Party, which is the only party's voters where there isn't a plurality in terms of more but there's still more people in the Green Party would like to see, like even a third of Green voters would like to see a reduction in immigration. So it is unfortunately one of those issues that Labour, they are going to have to show reductions in net migration unless they get a lot better at persuading the public than they have been. Vince, they're saying, without a proper strategy, board command is just policy turd. Yeah, I think it's a complete dead end. I think it's a dead end of a policy. I'm going to discuss it in a video, a separate video. The border command policy, it's like, it is popular, but you have to ask yourself, in order to win votes, it doesn't matter. Like, just implementing a popular policy doesn't win you votes. The voters who approve of it have to know you've done it, right? So let's think through the process. How are voters going to know they've done it? One way they could know is Labour tell them, right? Or the media. The media won't bother. The media are not going to promote Labour for them, right? So Labour would have to be able to tell the public. As we discussed right at the start of the stream, Labour are very bad at telling the public anything, right? So they're not going to learn about it unless Labour do step up their comms. And I mean properly. I don't just mean make it a bit better. It's so shit. A little bit better is not good enough. They need to make it good. Preferably excellent, but at least good. In fact, if Labour's communications, I don't want to knock the comms team, but whoever's leading it, Labour's communications, if it were to have a visit by Ofsted, it would be in special measures. It's that bad. So they're not going to. So how else could you find out about it? Well, you could see in the news cases of this Border Security Command arresting and charging people and seeing convictions for people smugglers. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that. The other way people could see that it's worked is by the small boat crossing stopping. Well, Labour have already accepted that the small boats will carry on for the rest of this Parliament at least. So, yeah, it's a turkey of a policy. It's popular and they are doing it, but they're not going to win any votes off it because how, to the people who want the policy, how do you prove to Labour that they've done what they wanted? And also ask yourself, why do people want this Border Security Command? Because they want the boats to stop. If the boats don't stop, you know, you can say, because even if you say to a voter face to face, they implemented this and you think it's a good idea, they will straight away say to you, but it hasn't worked then, has it? So they didn't do it well. It's like Brexit with the Conservatives. All right, they might have done it, but they messed it up. Yeah. So that policy, I agree, is not going to get Labour anywhere. The way they're doing it is not going to get them anywhere. But it is what it is. But the point is that in terms of immigration as well, like we're talking net migration figures are the ones Labour are targeting. Again, I don't think that's sensible. I think you should split up into types of immigration. I don't think people feel threatened by university students. It's same with the youth mobility scheme. The reason why we're having to cap numbers is because Yvette Cooper said to Starmer, you told me to reduce migration, now you're doing this to me. I don't think people feel threatened by young people from the EU coming over for a couple of years. I don't think people feel threatened by university students doing a bit of part-time work. Like, we know why people think net migration needs to go down, because they think there are too many foreign workers. There are. We don't have enough workers, but that's what people think, right? So people, when they're thinking about that, they're not thinking about a student or someone on a youth experience programme. So I think Labour should be splitting immigration into its types. But anyway, they're not. So anyway, that is that one. So I'll just catch up with any comments there. Richard there saying students should never have been counted as immigrants. No. Well, or I mean, if you just remove them from the figures, Reform UK and the Tories would just say you were fiddling the figures, right? You know how the Tories tried to claim crime was down by excluding fraud, the biggest source of crime in the country, by just chopping it from the figures. I mean, I don't know to what extent they got away with it, Labour would not get away with doing the same thing on immigration. The media would call it out immediately. But what they could do is split it up into types. I see no problem with that. And then the media would still be free if they wanted to add it all up and present the net migration figures. But for Labour to say work visas, student visas, youth mobility, whatever, asylum, split it up into its different types. Over there saying, remind me again what is keeping Labour solving their budgetary issues by taxing high incomes instead of burdening the working class and working poor. We are sort of beholden. I mean, when people just say, well, slap massive taxes on the rich, when you do that, you cause a lot of very wealthy people to leave the country. We're seeing it right now. To give you the devil's advocate view, we're seeing it right now. Absolute, and the media delighting in talking about the sheer number of very wealthy people leaving the country. Now, if they're not paying, I mean, it's not that these people were paying no taxes either. They were paying taxes, so we are losing tax revenues when they leave. However, if you extract more from the people who remain, it's still worth it. But there is a point at which, if you just apply high taxes on very wealthy people, they will actually leave. What you need is an international agreement. Now, where we could do it, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, where we could do it is with land tax, because there's no reason for anyone to then move, because a person who owns land in this country will have to pay the tax no matter where they live, because the tax is on the land. And if they don't want to pay the tax on the land and they sell it, they can still live here on the same tax regime. So you know how it works. So land tax is the way to do wealth taxes. Now, why Labour aren't doing that? I mean, maybe they are, because it's complicated. Rachel Reeves couldn't have done that in her first budget, because if you mess it up, you mess it up badly. So that would take years to do it right. You cannot risk suddenly landing homeowners with, like, if you replaced council tax with land tax, you need to make sure no one with an ordinary home ends up paying more than they would have done in council tax, right? But in terms of wealth tax, that's where you need to do it, land tax. I'd like to think that behind the scenes they're working on it for maybe the next parliament. I have no confidence they are, though. None at all. But that is what it is. You cannot just, as the populists will say, just because the government in theory can set whatever tax rates it can, doesn't mean people have to pay them. And wealthy people they can stay and just move their money. First of all, it's super easy to move money. Taxing money is for very rich people. They're not only more motivated to get out of taxes because it's worth more to them. They can move themselves, or they can stay and move their money. Jacob Rees-Mogg shifts all his money to Ireland, right? Jacob Rees-Mogg lives in this country, is very wealthy, doesn't even pay the right amount of tax because he just moved the money abroad. And that's what anyone can do. Doesn't matter what you set the tax rate at. And the higher you set that tax rate, the more they'll just move it. And then there's actually a point at which you make less money. You actually bring in lower tax revenues. So there's a sense in which if you tax the rich, you actually end up having to tax the poor more. And I know it's uncomfortable for people to think that. It's really frustrating, but that is the reality. It's a bit like, what did Liz Truss teach us? What did Liz Truss teach us? We are beholden to investors in the gilt market, private investors in the gilt market. We can't control them. If we present a budget that makes them think that we will not be able to pay our debts, then they'll sell their bonds. And then we'll end up with higher yields, higher cost of borrowing. We knacker the economy completely. And that is why. Now, there may be some, I will say, there may be some policies in terms of more taxes on the rich that Rachel Reeves could get away with, but because she's not super confident, isn't going to risk it, because the economy is so weak that if you accidentally implement a wealth tax or a tax on the rich in whatever form that ends up bringing in less money, you blow a hole in your budget and you look stupid into the bargain. So it's I mean, this is why I was talking about this. I've actually done a recording with someone else for someone else's channel, which I'll plug once the video is out, where they were asking me about non-dom status, like why, because I think he was on the side of not removing non-dom status, and he was making the point it's not raising any revenues. Removing non-dom status is taxing the rich more, but it's not actually raising very much. Doesn't raise very much, and that's what you generally find. Wealth taxes don't actually raise much because wealthy people can, because it's so easy to move money around the world, you just don't get much out of it. But I was making the point that because the public really hate the fact that we seem to have, well, we do have a system that is stacked in favour of the rich not paying their fair share of taxes. We absolutely have a system like that. So I think Labour got rid of the non-dom status, have this policy on non-dom status, because it would raise some money. It doesn't raise very much at all. It raises next to nothing. It's like $500 million or something. But it would raise some money. And you can say that's a tax on the rich. I think it's the optics of it. It's the politics. Because it's not actually, maybe with land reform, but in terms of just taxing wealth, it's not actually possible to do it and make any money. Countries that have tried don't make money out of it. You know, when we had this thing recently with Gary Stevenson saying we need to tax the tax rate, and then everyone came out the woodwork saying, no, Norway do it, Norway do it. And it's like they don't raise anything. Spain do it. They don't raise anything from it. They don't raise anything. It doesn't raise any money because the rich just move their money. They just shift it. And then you end up getting next to nothing out of it. Vince saying all taxation has a rate v return curve, yeah. But let's not go into Laffer curve territory, which the Tories try to use to excuse cutting taxes for the rich, which is absolute madness because this Laffer curve, although it's based on something that, yes, is but where you place the curve is just made up. So the actual value is made up. But anyway. Introduce VAT on financial planning services. So, okay, yeah, so in terms of where there is more scope for taxation, I would like to know the reason why you have VAT on, you don't have VAT on financial services. Now, I know that financial services is a massive money spinner in the UK. I get that. But so are legal services, and legal services have VAT. I know that. I've paid them in the past. So I would love to know I would love to know that. I wonder if it's again another case of too scared to do it because financial services are such a big part of our economy that if you get it wrong, you end up blowing a big hole in the budget. I just wonder if some of it is because of being a bit timid because Reeves cannot afford, like, for example, let's say the economy was booming and you introduced a taxation policy that in the end turned out to be a bad one, right? You'd get away with it. You'd get away with it. You'd just fix it later. That's not the situation we have. If you get it a bit wrong, we could be in recession or having to announce even more unpopular cuts to public spending, right? So, yeah. Do I have another one? Another one I wanted to put up? No, not unless someone mentions it in the chat. One of Farage's little grifts is selling non-dom status here to foreign tax dodgers. Yeah, well, as I say, at some point that grift should be over. However, it really doesn't raise anything. It's there for the optics. It's there so if anyone says, why aren't the Labour taxing the rich more? It's like, well, they are. It's not the only example. There are others as well, but that's the obvious one to talk about. Every government employs people for HMRC from the big accounting firms who stay a while, then go back to the private sector. What incentive is there for them to close loopholes? So that's another point worth mentioning. So obviously, even though Rachel Reeves is an actual economist of more experience than any chancellor we've had, maybe ever, but certainly in modern times, she still needs advisors. Ministers cannot themselves formulate policy entirely. They need expert advisors, and you are correct to note that those expert you're not going to get an expert advisor who is tried and trusted anywhere from other than the sector where, yes, there might be a vested interest. Like, for example, in theory, you might say you could get an academic, a professor of economics, but a professor of economics is not tried and tested. They come up with ideas that might sound good, but unless you can show that they've worked, and academics of economics can't, unless they are taken on by a government, it's a risk. So yeah, you are right about that. There is also potential for Humphrey Appleby type resistance within the civil service on policies as well. That's possible. And also the other thing to bear in mind, remember, it doesn't matter what the advisors say, it doesn't matter what Rachel Reeves thinks. If the OBR calculate that a particular measure will reduce tax revenues, then it doesn't matter that Rachel Reeves might say, I don't think it will. She can't do it. Otherwise, she'll throw her budget out of whack. So the OBR itself, the models they use are also about, like, for example, I get the impression if the OBR had never existed, remember it was brought in by the Tories, we are stuck with it, by the way, we can't get rid of it. If the OBR had never existed, we may never have had these reductions to disability payments. You know, it came about as a result of this need to balance the books. But if Rachel Reeves, for her spring budget, could have just said that, the calculations are the fiscal headroom is still there, because she could have done her own, she could have decided what model to use for the calculations, then we wouldn't have needed those cuts. That's not to let Labour off the hook for it, but it is nonetheless the case that there are factors involved in economic policy beyond just the Chancellor that are necessary as well. Mike Pagan is saying, I feel torn as I kind of feel like much of this has already been born of voters being ignorant, impatient with the speed of parliamentary process when it comes to change actually happen. Some of it has, and again, from that point of view, it is just a case of just stay the course. But it is also worth remembering Labour have also made mistakes. It's not, I don't think it's enough for Labour to go, look, we've got these popular policies in place. First of all, they have some unpopular policies, and it's no point in downplaying it. The winter fuel allowance has caused a lot of resentment, and pensioners are a big voting bloc. That's a huge, it doesn't matter whether you approve of the policy or not. It was risky politics, and the risk has not paid off. And admittedly, it could have been a lot worse if we'd have actually had reports of people dying of hypothermia over winter. It would have been much worse, but it's still bad. And ironically, do you know who it's worse for? It's not worse for the people who struggle. The people who are mostly griping about it are the people who wouldn't, if you hadn't told them you were taking it off them, they would never have noticed. They had their heating on full, and they're still griping about it. Anyway, the other problem, of course, is the disability cuts. Now, the disability thing, nationally, you can actually make, that's actually probably a popular policy nationally, because a lot of the public resent benefits of all kinds. They resent it because they know they're paying for it, right? But a lot of people in need of disability payments are disproportionately in areas that vote Labour. Because why do certain voters vote Labour? Because Labour are the party that looks after those who need a leg up, so to speak. So, again, it's not just a bad policy. I mean, I make no comment on whether the winter fuel allowance is a good or bad policy. There's pros and cons to it. The disability one is a bad policy because it's hampering people's ability to get into work. It's not particularly moral, and it's damaging to the local economy. But in an area where you've got lots of people in receipt of it and are therefore more likely to vote for Labour because they need it, if you take even some of it away from them, you're giving them motivation to not vote Labour. You're basically saying to them, well, if you don't vote for Labour and you let the Conservatives in, they'll make it even worse for you, which is true. But that's a pretty shitty campaign message. David there, I think this is a continuation of a thing, but I'll jump in here. It's a bear trap for Labour, like reducing national insurance on workers, forcing it to be claimed from employers to fill the black hole in revenue collections. So it's very difficult to know whether that was an actual trap. I mean, the Tories, yes, it was a trap from the Tories' point of view. They deliberately put a hole in the economy. And do you know what? They deliberately put that black hole in there so that they knew Labour would be forced to balance the books, to have to raise a lot of taxes. So yeah, Conservatives absolutely laid that trap. I'm in two minds about it. On the one hand, if they had to raise that much money, employers' national insurance was the obvious way to do it. So it may have been something Labour had no choice in. On the other hand, when the Conservatives reduced national insurance at the start of 2024, and they did it twice, did Labour have to promise to keep those cuts in place? Could Labour have, and I've said this before, could Labour have said, we're going to put those national insurance rates back, but we will not raise them above that level? Could Labour have promised not to raise VAT, national insurance, or income tax above the January 2024 levels, or the start of 2024 levels? Could they have phrased it like that? Because I would like to know on what evidence. Did they say, no, we'll have to accept these cuts because they had evidence that it was necessary to guarantee votes? Or did they just do it instinctively? That's what I would like to know. If they did it instinctively, they may have made a mistake. Because it would have been better economically if Labour had been able to say, we don't think the government can afford these cuts, so we're going to put them back, but we will promise not to raise those three taxes above the 1st of January 2024 levels. That's what I would have liked to have investigated. Now, for all I know, Labour did investigate it very robustly, and they got very detailed analysis that said, yeah, we'll lose some of our key voters if we put the cuts back. And it may be that Labour then had no choice. But I would just query it. I would query that. Would I not agree then? It's a kind of good thing that we're still at the beginning of the Parliament, time to correct course. Yes. But the other thing I would say is if we were later in the Parliament anyway, then the things that people are expecting would be in place. But it is good. I prefer it if Labour would recognise. I think they do recognise their communication's bad. I don't think they're stupid, right? And I think that's why there have been some changes to their communications approach. I think the problem is they recognise when it's not working, but they don't know what to do to make it right again. They're not talking to the right people. That's their problem. They don't have anyone advising. I know they've approached a few YouTube channels, right? That's good, okay? But I'll tell you something, until YouTube is massive for that. I mean, other people, I'm not expert on other social media platforms. I'm sure they could do much better on the others as well. YouTube is absolutely huge. I'm going to finish off. I'm going to just show you the situation for them. Let me put it up. Where's it gone? In my analytics. So let's see if I can do this bit by bit. I may cover myself up. I'm not that important. So this is for the month of April. So you can see again, 887,000 unique viewers, 522,000 returning viewers, so they watch something again. Now, in terms of other key things, age profile. Oh no, I've cut it off. Sorry. Hold on. Try that again. I may just have to do a different one for each one. If I put it full screen, it'll just be too small for you to see. So I'll just have to do it bit by bit. Right, age profile. So you can see, and this is typical, there's nothing unusual about April here, that, like, what is that? About 60% of all my viewers are 55 years or older. Those are the main voters. Those are the main voters. You know, and there's actually 18.5%. In fact, it'll be over 20%. They're like 40 or over on top of that as well. You know, it's just, I mean, so it's key demographics. It's not like I'm only attracting younger. I mean, if they want the young, that's TikTok, right? To get through to younger people, Instagram and TikTok, right? Which is why they should be active on all social media platforms. But in terms of the voters they're trying to reach through mainstream media, YouTube is the best place to reach them. YouTube is 100% the best place to reach them. And they're not doing it. Absolutely not doing it. And I'm, you know, if you were to be able to explain this to Labour and just how easy it would be for them to do it, it wouldn't cost, they'll be thinking in terms of, oh, we need a studio, we need this. I mean, no, you don't need all of that at all. You do not need it. You need, in fact, I'll tell you, all you need is basically a broom cupboard and 2 staff. That's all you need. And I mean that literally. You could have the tiniest room, just a room that's no use for anything, just big enough for 2 people to work in. And you'd employ one of them to be, you need someone who's a good editor. And you'd need someone who's good at producing content, engaging content, and they need various skills between them, right? They need to be able to design decent graphics, but a lot of people can learn. I mean, I could learn to be much better at that if I wanted. I just can't be arsed, right? But you know, you need a few skills between them, but you can easily get 2 people that have those skills. And then all you need to do, you just need to do simple things. I was saying on Graham's stream, I think Rishi Sunak actually did one clever thing while he was leader. It probably wasn't his idea, but it works well, I thought. I don't know why they didn't carry on with it. It was quite cringe if you're not right wing, but it was very effective. And he did this thing where he and Lee Anderson, I think they did it in a school or something, but they did it somewhere, right? And they just got out some letters and they were going through like what people had written in, like questions and stuff like that, and having a bit of a laugh and a joke and explaining a few things. And they just put a video of the 2 of them together. Labour could do that. You just get 2 cabinet ministers who are chalk and cheese, very different ones, like Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner, for example. And you could have like Ed Miliband, Shabana Mahmood, people like that. Just, you know, people who've got slightly different personalities or very different personalities, and just get them, just spend an hour recording them, just talking to each other about comments from the public. You know, these are I got this comment from one of my constituents, or I got this comment from someone in Wrexham or something, right? And just talking about it. And then this is why you'd need someone who's a good editor, because you don't put out a video of an hour of it. You edit it down to 10 minutes of the highlights of the best, of the most engaging, entertaining stuff, and you put that out. And you could do and that's what, 2 hours, let's say, because you'd brief them on you could give, you know, I like PMQs. Keir Starmer's advisors give him a few jokes to tell. You'd do the same thing, feed him a few good lines, right? So 2 hours of their time, and because it wouldn't be the same 2 every week, you could do that. And the other thing as well, if you make it a hit, you do it really, you know, make sure it's engaging, but it has the serious message, but it's infotainment, right? It's entertaining, but where they're also giving you information. And it would also introduce the public to these cabinet ministers that at the moment most people don't know about them, because spitting image isn't a thing. Would I work with Labour to improve their comms if they'd approach? Of course I would. I would advise them on it. But they don't. You know, if they could sort out their communication, and it's so easy. It's because they're fixed. They have this fixed mindset. Their media training, they've all grown up and they've all learned. They've done their apprenticeship, learning how to engage with mainstream media. And it's like, okay, do that as well. But the mainstream media are never going to present what you want them to present. Like Labour are killing it on the NHS. And they've already made it one of the most popular things, one of the most popular policies Labour had, like, was criminal sanctions for water executives whose companies break the law. That's now law. They've done it. The public don't know they've done it. It's absolutely mad. Anyway, last little comment because we've run out of time. Esrat says, and I've heard some people we know sure that Labour lost mainly because of trans stance, pissed off parents, friends, etc. Have any data for or against this? It will 100% not be the case. It's not a good policy, but I can't give you recent polling because almost nobody polls on saliency. But whenever there has been polling on the saliency of trans issues, in other words, how much of an issue is it for your vote, it's always incredibly low. So no, it will 100% not be that. Now, you could argue in Runcorn, it may or may not have done, because it's like 6 votes, right? Of course, there could be 6 trans people there who might have voted Labour in the same situation, or 7 who actually needed. But then you could also argue that if Labour had said, look, we're going to change the legislation because trans women are women, that they may have lost more votes specifically for Runcorn. My point is they wouldn't have lost those votes at the general election. But no, it's I know people always like to say, oh, the reason they lost is because of this thing that I think. It's not. The reason they lost is winter fuel allowance came up a lot. The winter fuel allowance came up a lot. So did PIP. Those are the things that are coming up on the doorstep. So it's not anything else. Anything else is someone pushing their hobby horse. It may be cost of living still. People feeling that the cost of living is still not sufficiently eased. It may be immigration as well. Some of those are 2 big issues: cost of living, immigration, small boats, all that sort of stuff. But the main issues in terms of like real because people will give Labour time on those ones, the ones that are missteps that Labour have done. Like if it's something that Labour haven't done yet, there are some people who will give them more time. But in terms of stuff they've done that are unpopular, it's winter fuel allowance and PIP. But anyway, there we go. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.